2 years after her husband left her with nothing but a packed bag and a sleeping child, Norah Beckett walked back through the same neighborhood where she used to push a stroller and pretend everything was fine. The street looked exactly the same, but the woman walking down it was not. On a quiet Saturday in late October, with the maple leaves still clinging to the trees along Elgin Street, a man stopped dead on the sidewalk outside a small storefront. Through the glass, he could see a woman standing in the middle of a bright, busy room, directing two employees who were sealing boxes and stacking them against the wall. A phone on a tripod was live streaming, and the notification sound went off every few seconds. On the shelves behind her, rows of handmade candles, bath salts, and linen spray bottles lined the wall from floor to ceiling. A small chalkboard sign near the window read, "Beckett & Co., handmade in Ottawa." The man standing outside was Darren. He pressed one hand flat against the glass, then pulled it back before anyone could see him. His mouth went dry. That was his wife. Or she used to be. He had spent 2 years telling himself she would never amount to anything. He had spent 2 years being wrong. His mind drifted back, the way it always did when he passed something that reminded him of what he had thrown away. It had been a Thursday afternoon in late November when everything changed. Norah had been in the kitchen making lentil soup, the kind Darren used to say he loved, before he stopped saying much of anything kind. Their daughter Marigold, 3 years old, with curls that never sat flat, and a tendency to narrate every single thing she did, was sitting on the kitchen floor arranging wooden blocks into what she called my hospital. Darren came in from work earlier than expected. He dropped his coat on the bench without hanging it up. He stood in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen and looked at Norah with an expression she had learned to read the way some people read weather. Something was coming. "You've been crying," he said. She hadn't been. "No, I haven't. You look like you have." He opened the fridge, closed it. "Did you call your mother again? I talked to her for 10 minutes. I can always tell when you talk to her. You get that face." Norah stirred the soup and said nothing. "I'm serious. You get this look like the whole world is against you. It's exhausting to come home to." Marigold glanced up from her blocks. Then she looked back down and said, very seriously, to no one in particular, "This block is sick. She needs medicine." "I'm not trying to make things difficult," Norah said. "You never try. That's the point." Darren pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I carry everything in this family. You know that, right? You stay home, you do whatever it is you do all day, and I go out and pay for it. I take care of Marigold. I do everything in this house. That's not a job, Norah. That's just being a parent." She turned around and looked at him. "You're a parent too." "Yeah, and I also work 60 hours a week, so don't start." She turned back to the stove. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she didn't want him to see. Marigold made a small sound of concentration. "Now this block needs surgery," she announced. Norah almost smiled. "Almost. I need you to start contributing," Darren said. "I'm not doing this forever. We've talked about this. Marigold isn't old enough for full-time daycare, and the last time she was sick, she's always sick because you coddle her. Kids get sick. You can't use that as an excuse for the rest of your life. She was in emergency 3 times last year. Other parents don't put their whole lives on hold every time a kid has a temperature." Norah set down the wooden spoon. She turned around very slowly. "Are you saying our daughter's health is an inconvenience?" Darren stood up. He picked up his coat and walked down the hall toward the spare room, which had slowly become less spare and more permanent over the last 8 months. Before he closed the door, he said, "I'm saying you need to figure out your life, Norah, because I'm done figuring it out for you." The door clicked shut. In the kitchen, Marigold looked up at her mother. She held out a wooden block. "Mama, this one needs a hug." Norah sat down on the kitchen floor beside her daughter and held the block, and she let herself cry where Darren couldn't see. The next few months were the kind that don't arrange themselves into neat memories. They blurred. Darren's coldness had become the weather inside their home. Not one storm, but an ongoing gray. A chill that had been there so long she'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a draft in winter. He came home late more often. When she asked why, he said work. When she asked about his colleague, a woman named Petra who had started calling in the evenings, he said she was imagining things. When she found a receipt for a restaurant she'd never been taken to, he said it was a team dinner. She didn't believe him. But she had no proof, and she had no money, and she had Marigold. One evening in March, when Marigold had gone to bed early, Norah sat on the couch with her laptop and opened a browser window. She searched for part-time work she could do from home. She found a forum thread about selling handmade goods on Etsy. She followed a link, then another. She stayed up until 1 in the morning reading. She didn't tell Darren. She started small. She had always made candles as a hobby, soy wax, wooden wicks, scents she mixed herself from essential oils she ordered in small bottles. She listed 6 of them on Etsy with photos taken on the kitchen table against a piece of white cardboard. She priced them low. She told no one. The first order came 11 days later. It was for 2 candles from someone in Winnipeg. Norah sat in the kitchen with the confirmation email on her phone screen and cried for the second time that month, but for a completely different reason. She fulfilled the order on a Tuesday while Marigold was napping. She walked to the post office on Bank Street with the package under her arm and Marigold in the stroller. The woman at the counter put a label on the box and handed her the receipt. Norah folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket. That was the beginning. She didn't tell Darren about any of it. Every week, she set aside the small amount she made, $18 here, $34 there, and tucked it inside the envelope at the back of a binder she kept in the closet, behind Marigold's vaccination records. The envelope grew slowly. She kept making candles after Marigold went to sleep, pouring wax at the kitchen table with the window cracked open. She was building something. She didn't know yet what it would become. The night it all broke open was a Thursday in June. Darren came home and found the kitchen counter covered in candle molds and measuring cups. He set his bag down slowly. He looked at the setup. He looked at Norah. "What is this? I'm making candles. I've been selling them online." He was very quiet for a moment. Then, "You're selling candles?" "Yes, and you didn't tell me. I wanted to see if it would work first." He crossed his arms. "So you've been hiding things from me." "I've been working. There's a difference." Darren sat down. He rubbed his face. "How much are you making?" "Not much yet. But it's growing." "How much, Norah?" She told him. It was $340 over the last 2 months. It wasn't nothing. But she knew, looking at his face, that it was nothing to him. "That's not a business," he said. "That's a hobby you're taking too seriously. I think it could be a real business. I've been researching." "You think you can run a business?" He said it the way someone might say you think you can fly. Not angry. Almost worse than angry. Amused. "You barely got out of bed for a month after Marigold was born. That was postpartum depression. You're not someone who builds things, Norah. You just aren't. And that's fine. But don't pretend selling $40 candles on the internet makes you an entrepreneur." She stood very still. "Who told you that you were capable of this?" he asked. She didn't answer. Later that night, she heard him on the phone out on the back deck. His voice was low and unhurried, the way it never was when he spoke to her anymore. She stood at the patio door and listened. She couldn't hear what he said, but she heard him laugh, and it was the kind of laugh she hadn't heard from him in 2 years. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought, clearly and without drama, "I need to get out." She spent the next 6 weeks preparing. She bought a small voice-activated recorder at a shop on Rideau Street and left it on the bookshelf in the living room on evenings when Darren made his calls inside. She didn't get much, but she got enough. His voice unmistakably tender, saying a name that was not hers, making promises she had stopped receiving years ago. She called a friend from university named Yasmin, who worked in family law. Not to hire her, just to understand what she was up against. "If you have no income and he has a steady salary, he'll argue custody," Yasmin said over coffee. "You need to document everything, his absence, his temper, the times he wasn't there when Marigold was sick, and you need to be building something financially, even small. Courts like to see that a parent is trying." "I've been selling candles." Yasmin looked at her. "Then sell more candles." She did. She started a social media account under the name Beckett & Co. She filmed herself making candles in the kitchen after Marigold went to sleep. She talked to the camera quietly, the way she'd learned to move through her own house, carefully, without waking anyone. The first video got 43 views. The second got 200. The third was shared by a lifestyle account in Toronto and got 4,000. She reinvested every dollar she made. New molds, better wax. A ring light she put together herself on the kitchen table at midnight, following a YouTube tutorial. Marigold slept through all of it, her stuffed bear tucked under her chin. 2 months before Norah filed for divorce, Darren came home and told her, without particular emotion, that he had been seeing someone. Her name was the same name Norah had heard on the recorder. He said it wasn't her fault. He said they'd grown apart. He said these things in the kitchen, with the same flat delivery he used to read out grocery lists. "Are you going to say anything?" he asked. "Yes," Norah said. "I'm going to ask you to leave." He blinked. He had not expected that. "I'll call a lawyer tomorrow," she said. "You should do the same." She had already called one. He packed a bag that night and went to stay with his brother in Canada. Norah put Marigold to bed, came downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and opened her laptop. She had 3 new orders. She packaged them with steady hands. Darren fought the divorce the way men fight things they didn't expect to lose. He hired an aggressive family lawyer. He argued that Norah had no sustainable income. He argued that Marigold would be better served by a parent who could provide stability. He stood in the mediation room in a pressed suit and spoke with the calm authority of a man who had never doubted his place in any room. Norah sat across from him. She had a folder. The folder contained bank statements showing consistent growth over 6 months. It contained her Etsy seller metrics. It contained a business registration certificate she'd filed 2 weeks prior. It contained, in a separate sealed envelope, the audio file she had transferred to a USB drive and submitted to her lawyer. She also had a notebook with dates. Every date Marigold had a fever. Every date Darren hadn't come home. Every date she'd sat in the emergency waiting room at Chio alone, with her daughter's hand in hers, and her phone on silent, because she knew if she called him, he wouldn't answer. The mediation lasted 3 hours. When it ended, Darren walked out of the room without looking at her. His lawyer gathered her papers with the expression of someone who had expected to do better. Norah walked to the elevator. When the doors closed, she let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 2 years. She had $310 when she moved into the apartment on Somerset Street. Not $250. $310. She counted it twice on the edge of the bed while Marigold slept in the portable crib in the corner. Her stuffed bear still tucked under her chin. The apartment was small. The radiator made a sound at night. The previous tenant had left a strip of floral contact paper along the bottom of the kitchen cabinets that Norah decided to leave, because it was cheerful and she could use some cheerful. She opened her notebook. She wrote at the top of a blank page, Day 1. We made it. Now we build. She couldn't afford a packing table. She used the kitchen counter. She couldn't afford a storage unit. She used the closet. She set Marigold up with a coloring book and a cup of crayons in the corner of the living room, and she poured wax and mixed scents, and photographed everything in the pale morning light that came through the east-facing window. Orders kept coming. She stayed on top of them by sleeping less and working in every gap Marigold gave her. When her daughter napped, Norah packaged. When Marigold went to bed, Norah filmed. She learned how to use a scheduling tool so posts went out at the right time. She learned how to respond to comments without making it sound like a customer service script. She made her page feel like a person, because it was one. 3 months after moving in, she rented a small commercial kitchen space on weekends to make larger batches. 6 months after moving in, she signed a short-term lease on a narrow storefront on Elgin Street. It had a painted brick wall, a big front window, and enough space for shelves, a packing station, and a small live stream corner. She set up with secondhand ring lights and a stool she found at Value Village. She hired one employee, a young woman named Cleo who had answered her job posting on Facebook Marketplace and turned out to be both organized and genuinely enthusiastic about candles, in a way Norah found deeply reassuring. The shop had been open 4 months when Darren walked past it on a Saturday in October and stopped dead on the sidewalk. Norah didn't see him that day. She was in the back, coordinating a bulk order when Cleo leaned through the curtain and said, "There was a man standing outside the window for a while. He left. What did he look like?" Cleo described him briefly. Norah was quiet. "Did he come in?" "No, he just stood there. It was a bit odd." "Okay," Norah said. "Thanks." She finished the order. She thought about Darren standing on the other side of that window looking in. She thought about the day he sat at her kitchen table and said, "You're not someone who builds things." She didn't feel triumphant. Exactly. She felt something quieter than that. Something more like resolution, like a door closing firmly, with her on the right side of it. It was around this time that she met Harriet. She came in on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of older woman who moves through a room like she owns the temperature in it, unhurried, deliberate, curious about everything. She picked up 3 candles, smelled each one carefully, and set the third one down with a small, satisfied nod. "Bergamot and cedar," she said. "My late husband would have loved this. It's one of my favorites to make," Norah said. The woman, Harriet, bought 4 candles and a room spray. Before she left, she stopped at the door. "Do you ever do corporate orders?" Norah hesitated just a beat. "I'm working on it." Harriet looked at her the way some people look at a problem they've already half solved. "My son's firm does client gifts every quarter. I've been telling him to find something local and handmade for 2 years. He keeps buying gift baskets from chains." She shook her head. "I'll send him in." Her son's name was Theo, and Norah instinctively checked the list of names she'd been building in her mind, and Theo was not on it. He came in the following Friday, carrying a folder and a slight air of someone who had been sent by his mother and was now prepared to make the best of it. He was quiet and careful and asked good questions. He took notes. He said, My mom said the bergamot cedar one. He bought a sample set to bring back to the office. 3 weeks later, he came back with an order for 60 gift boxes. Norah looked at the number. She stayed very calm. After he left, she went into the back room and sat down on an overturned milk crate and breathed. "You okay?" Cleo called from the front. "I'm going to need help," Norah called back. "I know, I've already texted my cousin." Harriet became a fixture at the shop. She came in on Tuesday afternoons, bought something, and stayed to talk. She brought Norah soup once, in a container that smelled like rosemary, and something Norah couldn't identify, but that made her feel, for a few hours, like someone was taking care of her. "You're not eating properly," Harriet said, looking at the half-finished granola bar on the packing table. "I eat. That's not eating. That's surviving." She opened the container and set it on the table with the authority of someone who has raised people and knows what they need better than they do. "Sit down." Norah sat down and ate rosemary chicken soup in the back of her shop at 2 in the afternoon, and it was unexpectedly one of the better meals she'd had in months. Harriet started coming in twice a week. She held up signs during live streams without being asked. She helped Norah organize the stockroom with the brisk efficiency of someone who had once, apparently, managed a small fabric business for 12 years. She told stories about growing up in Charlottetown, about her husband who had been a school teacher, about Theo, who had been too serious as a child and had never quite grown out of it. "He's a good man," Harriet said one afternoon, while they were repacking a shipment that had arrived with damaged labels. "But he doesn't know how to stop working long enough to notice what's actually in front of him." Norah didn't say anything. She kept peeling labels. "He's mentioned you twice since his first visit here," Harriet said. "He mentioned the order probably. He mentioned you." Harriet held up a label and inspected it. "He said you ran a tight operation." Norah looked at her. "That's what he said." "From Theo, that's practically a sonnet." Norah laughed. It surprised her, a real laugh, the kind that comes out before you decide to let it. Harriet smiled at the label in her hand. Theo came back the following month to arrange the next quarterly order. He was methodical and thorough and brought his own pen, which Norah noted as a small but telling detail about a person. They sat at the work table in the back and went through the catalog. He made a small note next to 3 options. He asked about lead times. He asked about packaging customization. Then he paused. He was looking at the notebook near Norah's elbow, the one she used for production notes and the occasional thought she didn't want to lose. "My mother likes this place," he said. "She's been very kind. She doesn't do things out of obligation. If she's here, it's because she wants to be." Norah nodded. He looked at the catalog again. Chose the bergamot cedar for the full order, plus 2 new scents she'd developed in the fall. He capped his pen. He said without looking up, "I know this isn't the right context, but I'd like to take you to dinner." Norah was quiet for a moment. She straightened the corner of a label sheet on the table. "I'm not in a simple situation," she said. "I know." He looked up then. "My mother told me some of it, not to pressure you. I think she wanted me to understand." He paused. "I'm not in a hurry. I just wanted to say it." Norah looked at him. There was something about the way he sat, still, patient, not filling silence with reassurance, that she found unexpectedly staring. "I have a daughter," she said. "My mother mentioned Marigold. She said she sounds like a very practical person for someone who is 4. Norah almost smiled. "She told the mailman last week that he should wear a hat because the weather was going to turn." Was she right? It snowed the next morning. Theo nodded, like this confirmed something he'd suspected. "I'll ask again in a month," he said. "Or you can, whichever." He collected his folder, thanked her for her time, and left. Norah sat at the work table for a moment. Then she picked up her pen and wrote in the notebook, "Cedar plus bergamot, 60 units. Follow-up Jan 14, she underlined it twice. Then she turned the page. Darren came into the shop on a Wednesday morning in November, when Cleo wasn't in yet and Norah was alone reorganizing the front display. She heard the door. She looked up. He looked different, not dramatically, not ruined, not broken down, but smaller somehow than she remembered. His jacket was the same one he'd always worn, but it looked like he hadn't had it dry cleaned in a while. He had the specific expression of someone who has rehearsed a version of this moment and is now discovering the reality doesn't match the rehearsal. "I heard the shop was doing well," he said. She set down the bottle she was holding. "Can I help you with something?" "I wanted to see it." He looked around. He looked at the shelves, the chalkboard, the print runs of orders she had pinned to a corkboard near the counter. "You did all this?" "Yes." He was quiet. Then, "Petra and I ended things." Norah said nothing. "I'm not saying that to." He stopped. "I just thought you should know." She looked at him steadily, not with anger, not with satisfaction. with the clear, settled gaze of a woman who had already decided how much space to give this moment. "I hope things go better for you," she said. And she meant it, in the way you mean things that cost you nothing anymore. Darren nodded. He stood there another moment. Then he left. Norah watched the door close. She turned back to the display and picked up the bottle she'd set down. She adjusted it on the shelf until it sat level. Then she kept working. The custody hearing took place in December, on a morning that was so cold the windows of the courthouse fogged from the inside. Norah sat in a wool coat with her file folder on her lap. Marigold was with her parents for the morning, being fed too many crackers and allowed to watch as much television as she wanted, which Norah had explicitly sanctioned for exactly this occasion. The judge was a woman in her late 50s who asked precise questions and took her time with the answers. Darren's lawyer argued income. Norah's lawyer presented the business statements, the growth trajectory, the lease agreement, the employee record. She presented the audio file. She presented the notebook. The judge awarded primary custody to Norah, with structured access for Darren on weekends. Norah walked out of the courthouse into the cold. Her breath made a small cloud in the air. She stood on the steps for a moment, then pulled out her phone and called her mother. Her mother answered on the second ring. "It's done," Norah said. On the other end of the line, she heard her mother exhale, the specific exhale of someone who has been holding their breath for months. "Come home," her mother said. "I made soup." On the last day of January, Norah hired a second employee. She upgraded to a longer lease. She started taking weekend markets in the Glebe and in Westboro, and she found she was good at talking to people, which surprised her. She had always thought of herself as quiet, but she discovered that quiet and closed were not the same thing. Marigold came to the markets and sat behind the table in her winter coat, handing change back to customers with a solemnity that adults found charming and that Marigold considered simply correct procedure. "She's very serious," one customer said, delighted. "She gets it from her grandmother," Norah said. Theo came to a market in February. He didn't announce he was coming. He simply appeared at the table with a paper cup of coffee and bought 2 candles the same way any customer would. Marigold looked at him. "You came to the shop before," she said. "I did," Theo said. "You brought your own pen." He looked at Norah. Norah looked at the table. "I did," he said. "My friend Henry brings his own scissors to school," Marigold said. "In case that's practical," Theo said. "Yes," Marigold agreed. She handed him his receipt with both hands, the way she handed everyone their receipt. He took it with both hands, the way you take something when you understand it matters. Norah finally looked up. "Coffee?" he offered. He had, she noticed, brought 2 cups. She took the second cup. They stood at the edge of the market table as people moved past around them, and Marigold replenished the display from the box underneath the table with quiet efficiency. "Your mother said she'd be in Tuesday," Norah said. "She mentioned it. She's been in every Tuesday for 3 months, lad. She likes the bergamot cedar." He looked at her. "She also likes you. She doesn't say that about many people." Norah wrapped both hands around the cup. The coffee was good. The kind from the small roaster on Bank Street that she usually only got herself when she had a reason to celebrate something. "I'm still figuring things out," she said. "I know. Marigold comes first, in every decision." "That seems right," he said. He said it like a fact, not a concession, like it wasn't something that required discussion. She looked at him. He looked back. "Tuesday," she said. "Harriet doesn't usually come until 2. You could come at noon." Something shifted in his face. Quiet and unhurried, the same way everything about him seemed to move. "Noon," he said. "It's just lunch," she said. "I know," he said, "but things start somewhere." The following spring, Norah's monthly revenue exceeded what Darren had been making when they were married. She did not call him to tell him this. She found she didn't need to. What she did do, she signed a lease on a larger space on Bank Street, with a proper storefront and a back studio and room for a 3rd employee. She took Marigold to a park on a Sunday and watched her climb a structure with total focus and no hesitation, and thought, watching her, "She gets that from somewhere. She gets it from us." Harriet came to the new shop opening and brought a basket of food from a Charlottetown recipe she'd been making for 40 years. She took one look at the space, the wide shelves, the good light, the chalkboard menu Norah had done herself, and nodded once. "This is right," she said. It was the same thing she'd said the first time she walked into the old shop on Elgin Street, before either of them knew the other's name. Theo had helped move boxes the day before the opening, then left before anyone could thank him too many times. He came back the morning of with coffee, 3 cups, because Marigold had graduated to half a cup, warm with milk, a fact she had made known weeks ago, and that he had apparently filed away carefully. Marigold accepted the cup with both hands and said, "Thank you, Theo." "Thank you for supervising the move yesterday," he said. "I found 4 things that were in the wrong boxes," she said. "You did. I put stickers on them." "You did." She seemed satisfied. She took her half cup of coffee and went to inspect the new display shelves with the same expression Harriet wore when she was deciding whether something had been done correctly. Norah stood in the doorway of the new shop. The morning light came in clean and even across the wood floor. Outside, the street was beginning to wake up, the first cars moving slow and deliberate through the last of the April cold. She thought about the kitchen on a November night 2 years ago, with the soup on the stove, and the blocks on the floor, and the door clicking shut at the end of the hall. She thought about $310 in an envelope on a bed in a small apartment. She thought about the notebook. Day 1. We made it. Now we build. Theo came and stood beside her. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Marigold appeared between them, holding a candle she had selected from the new display. "This one smells like outside," she said approvingly. "That's the fir and clementine," Norah said. "It's my favorite," Marigold decided. She held it up to the light and rotated it once, examining it the way she examined most things, with complete seriousness and no sense at all that there was any rush. Across town, Darren sat in a rented apartment, watching a game on his phone with the sound off. He had a job now, a lateral move to a smaller firm in Nepean. He was fine. He was not unhappy, exactly. He was simply less than he'd once imagined himself to be, and he was beginning to understand that a great deal of the gap between who he was and who he'd believed himself to be was his own work. He had a framed photo of Marigold on his kitchen shelf. He looked at it sometimes. The way she held her chin, the way she looked at things sideways before deciding about them. He knew he hadn't deserved what he'd had. He was trying to be someone who deserved what came next. Whether that was enough was not something he'd know for a while yet. Back on Bank Street, Norah unlocked the front door of Beckett & Co. and turned the sign from closed to open. The day began.